another episode of One Miss Pod. I'm your host, Zach Long.
I'm Kelly Warner.
And on this week's episode, we're looking at 2011's Guilty of Romance, a film by Sion Sono. Am I pronouncing that right?
I think so.
It's that first name that always catches me up a little.
Yeah, sometimes I think it's spelled with an H in there, so I always kind of wondered, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know. I actually, even though it's clearly not when you look at it, I actually had that in my head for a bit, too. There must have been something that had it wrong somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, that happens.
Well, especially when you look at, not, it wouldn't happen now with how big he is, but when you first start bringing a new person or a new director over from Asia into the stateside, it's there was a lot of misnaming that happened there.
Oh, for sure. One of my favorite directors, Ishiro Honda, who made so many of the Godzilla movies, when he first started coming over to America, his movies started coming over here, he was credited as Inoshiro Honda. And for the longest time, American film critics thought Inoshiro Honda and Ishiro Honda were two different people. They're not, but that's the sort of shit we deal with.
I don't know why, but for some reason I really thought you were going to say that his name when he was brought over here was Eddie Honda. I don't know why. But before we jump into the movie for this week, and that, how have you been, Kelly?
I'm okay. I'm holding up. I mean, the quarantine is kind of getting to me. I think it's fair to say. But I'm all right. How are you? You're the one that's not been sleeping at all.
Well, right now I am working on 1 hour of sleep for the last 40 hours being awake.
Fucking insane.
I do this too often, but I'm actually doing pretty good. I finally got my bonsai tree came in.
Ooh.
And so I'm doing it'll take me a month because you have to trick these seeds into thinking it was winter. So I actually had to soak them in water for 24 hours, and then I had to put them in my fridge, and they're going to be there for a month. But it will give me a Japanese red elm, a Japanese red pine.
Oh.
And then I went out and I bought a bike to get out and about some more, and I bought a bunch of succulents. I even bought a little an Oriental lily. So
succulent.
I'm having a good time.
Succulent.
Oh, I know that's such a lovely word, but also they're beautiful, beautiful plants.
Succulent.
You know what? This is actually very fitting for this week's episode. But I mean, that's really been all that I've been up to. So why don't we move over to the news then?
Okay. The only new release that I think worth mentioning in Asian horror for you is exclusive to Shudder streaming is the new South Korean monster movie Monstrum. It's a well-liked film. I hear it's a little bit silly. I haven't seen it yet, but I hear it's pretty good. It's a period piece, giant monster sort of thing. Scriptophobic's own Andrew Roebuck wrote a pretty good piece on it, saying that he liked it a lot, and and he knows his monster movies, and so
he loves his kaiju.
Oh yes, and so So going off that, I feel I'm going to watch that one soon. I'm excited.
Well, if you catch it before the next episode, you should repeat it. You should report to us and let us know.
Oh, that's an idea. And then also in news, we mentioned it in the last episode about the upcoming Juwon the Grudge Netflix series, and a trailer dropped.
I'm excited about this one.
And you have watched that trailer many, many times.
I have seen the trailer conservatively 30 times.
I saw it twice. I mean,
we decided that we are going to talk about this, and so I watched it. I did what I do, which is I watched it with the subtitles. Then I watched it blocking up the subtitles, just looking at the imagery, and then I did it the other way where I just listened to it. And I do this thing because, of course I do, because I have to be weird. And it's actually very, very fascinating to me. From what I can tell, it seems that there are 3 timelines in effect. And I could be wrong. We have a black and white timeline, which represents something that's happened way in the past. And well, first off, one of the ideas that the trailer shows immediately is that the Grudge series, as we know it, was inspired by real events. So it's immediately playing with
Hmm.
it's like a Return of the Living Dead approach,
Yeah.
where in that
Yeah.
movie they pretended Night of the Living Dead was real, and
Yeah,
so
it's
there's
kind
a
of got a
house.
interesting true crime sort of vibe to some of it.
It's yeah, very much so, and it actually it references a lot of those touch points that we know from the Grudge, such as the croak, the death croak that we actually
Hmm.
have
Hmm.
as part of our introduction.
Hmm.
Except that instead of just being the death croak, it's like they actually hid words inside of it. So it's playing on things that you know, but changing it enough that it's very interesting.
Yeah, I was one of the things I kind of all right. The 2020 will see two new visions of the Grudge series. We got the new American remake that came out earlier in the year, and we're getting the new Netflix Japanese TV series. Now, I'm going to get some, I don't know, hate mail. Maybe not hate mail. I like the 2020
Nobody's
movie.
gonna email us for this.
No, fuck. Um, I like the 2020 movie, and one of the reasons why I
I
like it
liked it
is that
too.
it. Oh, you did? Okay. One of the reasons why I liked it is that it took this series that we've seen done. Re- I mean, we've seen a lot of people try to do the same thing over and over again in it.
Oh, not
And the
even.
new,
No, not try. We seen them straight up do it.
yeah, and one of the things I like about the 2020 film made in Hollywood was that it felt like it was trying something new. I mean, it was grimier, there were maggots, it was a nastier movie.
That I don't remember a lot about it, but what I do remember is that it was mean.
Yes, it was. It was kind of like the Evil Dead remake to
Oh, I love
Raimi's
that
thing.
remake. I
And
hated it when I first saw it, and then loved it afterwards.
I kind of get the sense with the new Netflix series of Juwon Origins is the title, that it's kind of doing the same thing where it's basically saying, you know this story, now we're going to try a different take on it. And I appreciate that.
There's some things that I really like from that trailer. So one of the ideas is that it's not just like instead of being a kid that's murdered, and it still might be because we do see a kid about the same age as Toshiro is in the original,
Hmm.
but he's in the black and white footage. But what we see is we hear a reference to a rape. Then we almost immediately after we have a woman who tells somebody that the kid is not his. Then we see that guy a couple scenes later. It has her down and is starting to cut open her stomach. And then a
Yeah.
couple scenes after that, we actually have like a demon baby, which we see
The
both
fucking demon
in
baby.
we see that demon baby in one of the more current eras because it's one of the things that Juon did was it played with time and it really destabilized you. All these
Hmm.
stories are happening and you can't
Hmm.
really get a great sense of how they line up. It could be 10 years apart and which it is in one part, or it could be 6 months apart. And this kind of has that same idea. And I noticed one edit that I think implied one of the characters actually surviving. Oh, which is another
Oh,
thing. There's a line in the trailer where somebody says that he grew up in that house and he's
yeah.
still alive, which means that either the curse is different or the curse hasn't happened yet. But we see one woman who's an old woman and she's wearing a red shirt. And then in the next cut, we see a young woman who has a similar haircut who's wearing a similar red shirt. So I think what we're actually seeing is like I think what we're going to see in the show is we're going to talk to this character and this character is going to give us a story and that story is going to jump us back in time and we'll watch from
Mm.
that perspective.
That
It,
sounds. I mean, it's always difficult to try to guess trailer editing versus what the actual series is going to present. But that sounds interesting, and I'm really into it. And I'm so happy to see that the horror baby from Train Spotting is still getting work.
I'm gonna have to cut down this laughing. Oh my god. Okay, that was amazing. Uh, I do. I'm very interested in this because it definitely seems like you mentioned very grimy, but it seems grimy in its own way, and it looks like it's going to be commenting on a lot of societal things that are relevant to Japan in the way that the original did, which the new one did not, as it was not made there.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think it's going to be interesting. It looks good, I think.
What I should have looked up and I didn't was I never actually looked up what the length of the episodes are.
That's a
My
good
guess is
point.
that it's probably going to be 20 minutes.
Really? That seems short for a drama, but
It does seem short for a drama, but there's already a precedent set for that with Netflix's other Japanese horror show,
mm,
whose name I forget right now. It's the one that has all the women chained to the table.
I don't
Um,
I don't know it. I don't know it.
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet, but I noticed that the episodes of that, it's 10 episodes, 20 minutes each. So it's essentially just a
It's like a movie.
what the, yeah, it's basically a movie split up in between cuz that would be what, 2 hours and 40 minutes? No, that would be 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Yes.
And so that
Okay, it's a
seems, I
long
mean,
movie.
that's a Sono movie.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so speaking of a Sono movie, do you have anything left to say on Juon before we move on?
Nope, nope. I'm ready to move on.
I think that is going to be quite good, or at least I hope it is.
It's going to be
Like
interesting at the very least.
one thing that will become more clear throughout this podcast is I don't get excited about a lot of upcoming releases. I am excited about this one.
It's so
So
hard to get you excited. It's so frustrating sometimes.
I remember I've had friends who are like, that must be so sad. But it's like, well, no. I don't get let down. I just get pleasantly surprised a lot more. But let's move on to what I thought was quite pleasantly surprising, which is Guilty of Romance. I hadn't known anything about this film going in except that Sono did it. It had a good trailer. I knew there was a murder, but I didn't really know any of the plot.
Oh, I didn't either. No, I knew the American Blu-ray release cover, which the cover of it, which to me suggested a much more pleasant movie than we got. Um,
It's
uh,
not until you see the Japanese cover and you go, oh, that's a dead body.
oh, oh fuck! It's one of those. Oh, oh.
Oh, it's a Sono movie made
It's
the
a
same
different.
year that he
This is a
made his
different movie.
angriest film.
Yeah. Yes. He made this 1 year after Cold Fish, and in the same year, 2011, as Himizu, his angry as fuck drama, which seemed like something of a angry response to the Fukushima disaster, earthquake, and all the aftermath. This film is not as angry as Himizu or as graphic as Cold Fish, but it's still um,
It's
it
this. I
earns
think
that
what this
R
movie
rating.
does is, well, it earns it that R rating for sure. But what I think that this one has that the other two don't have. Well, I can't say for Himizu or Himizu, but what I think this one has on Cold Fish is that this one is much more morally gray.
I would agree. Yeah,
In Cold Fish, we knew who the bad guy was, but in this, it's
the
really
bad guy
hard to
is
get a sense of.
fascinating, but yeah.
Absolutely. But I'll set up the plot real quick, which
Okay.
is
Yes.
the movie opens up with a murder. We don't see the murder, it's a body being found, and the body has been cut in two. Well, actually the arms and the head are missing too. So it's the torso and the legs. The legs have been cut at the waist and attached to the upper half of a mannequin, and then the upper half, the torso, has been attached to another mannequin. And
It's
this
disgusting.
then, it's really gross and very creepy looking. And that's actually what the cover for the Japanese version is this mannequin. Now it's not as gross because it doesn't show the gore like we
Mm-hmm.
see in the movie itself, but it's very creepy.
Mm-hmm.
We then it doesn't explicitly say it, but it's pretty clear that we're jumping back in time to a degree.
Yeah, I
And
wasn't sure about that for the longest time. I was like, "Oh, I figured it out." But, no, I didn't think that was obvious at the start that it's nonlinear, but, yeah, that's true.
I caught on to that immediately. I just had this narratively. It just had the sense that like we have this body and now we're meeting this woman and we get introduced to this woman. She's married to a very particular husband who is a writer and is very set in his ways, and she
Mm,
feels kind of lonely and empty, and she goes out to get a job, and she's working at a super, like a, not a superstore, that's a local, she's working at a
grocery store.
supermarket,
Yeah.
and she gets approached to do some modeling. This ends up becoming a porn shoot, and that which
Mhm. She did not know that,
she
but she
did
kind of
not
had
know
some.
that.
Right, yeah.
Well, she knew that there would be some nudity. She didn't realize
Yeah.
that it would be she didn't realize that it would be on film, not
Or that
on
there would be another
camera.
person, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, but this triggers her to start realizing like it kind of works as a source of both strength and shame for her, and it
It's like
leads
a
her to cheat
sexual
on her husband.
awakening that she's not proud of.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. But it basically leads her down doing more porn, eventually picking up strangers, and it starts to she meets some another woman who starts to introduce her to what it is to be a prostitute in Japan or in Tokyo's Love Hotel district, and it's the rest of the film is a journey deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole of sexual debauchery, while we realize that it's leading closer and closer. We know that the answer of who has been killed needs to happen soon, but we don't know if it's her or if it's the other woman or if it's a third woman. We don't know. We just know that it starts to build to a head,
Mhm.
and it's almost like a version of Homer's Odyssey about prostitution in a sense.
I also, think there's some comparisons to be made to, Paul Schrader's Hardcore. Just
I
a
That's one of
little bit
those
of getting
films I've been
lost.
wanting to see so badly, and I haven't yet. I think I would love
Yeah,
it.
but about the idea of, a girl getting lost in, the sex working and, getting lost in, yeah, but like Hardcore, it's about a woman getting lost in sexual depravity and, losing herself and, the darkness that she now dwells in.
I have not seen Hardcore, so I can't make this comparison, but what
Mm,
this one definitely focuses on is it focuses on gender and on expectation of gender within
yeah,
Japanese
yeah,
society, and it focuses very heavily on what does it take to push somebody this way, and what it turns out, which actually arises from the fact that this is based on a real case that we'll get into, but what they find out is that it ultimately doesn't take much.
no, no, I mean, she is shocked to find herself in this, world that she really had no interest in before, and then she's in it, and she begins to enjoy herself, you know? And to me, I wanna make clear, it's not one of those movies that says a woman being taken advantage of learns to enjoy that. That's not what the movie really is. It's about some sort of darkness within her being awakened and, you know, something like
Why
that.
don't we actually let's build on that and talk about the real case a little bit.
Yeah, you know a little bit more about it.
Yeah, you haven't looked this up, so I'm not going to. There's going to be a few key pieces I leave out of this,
Hmm.
just because it could lead to spoilers.
Yeah,
But
for the
what's
first episode,
interesting,
this is the first episode where we're gonna care about spoilers.
the movie's less than a decade old, and
I
it's one that's
know.
so twisty and so turny. Like
I know.
it's even as I was watching the movie, I tend to be very good at getting ahead of a movie because narratively.
Hmm.
And this one, I was on the edge of my seat, not sure where it would go, which is actually something that Sono had in for with me in Love Exposure as well.
Fucking love that movie.
We can't that movie doesn't fit this podcast, but can we just say 100% go fucking watch Love Exposure?
Go watch Love Exposure, and Why Don't You Play in Hell,
Oh
and
yes,
come back
yeah.
to us and come back to us and thank us. You're welcome.
Those movies. They're not horror movies, but they are among the best Japanese cinema of the 21st century.
Yeah.
But so one of the things that's interesting in you had mentioned that he had done Cold Fish just before this. In
Hmm.
Cold
Which
Fish,
was
he is
also based on a. I'm sorry. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I was about to say. In Cold Fish, he also spun off from a real event,
Hmm.
and in
But
this
then
one, he spins.
changed it dramatically in the final act, though.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean by spun off. Is he basically he's not adapting a real event so much as he is creating a new chain of events, starting from a point of reality.
Hmm. Yeah, basically willing to say, yes, this is based off that thing, and this is based off that thing you read in the newspaper. I mean,
So with this one, this case was actually really, really big. Now, a 40-year-old woman ends up dead. Well, 39 years old actually. Because she died in 1997. It would have been her birthday in like
okay.
2 months.
Mm-mm.
And the thing is, at it came out, well, why did this particular woman, why was she in this bad area, why was she in the Love Hotel area? Well, it turned out that she had a very, very successful job making the equivalent of 100,000 US dollars a year. And that's good money.
Hmm.
That's 90s money. And so she, even though she has this great career and everything is going good in her life, she was going out night after night to sleep with Johns essentially. And she would make around $150 because they would pay her about 250, and a service would take a cut, which is something that the movie shows and plays with.
Hmm.
But if she only worked with that service some days. She had a rule where she had to sleep with four people every night, even if all they could give her was $5. It didn't matter. The point was the actual act and the depravity of what she was doing. And so she eventually gets killed, and what happens is her body is found in an abandoned apartment, which is taken for this. And she is or sorry and the murder is pinned on this person who is from Nepal, and
Hmm.
he's a foreigner. Japan has a real problem with foreigners. He gets proven innocent, and then the case gets taken up to the Tokyo High Court, in which he is convicted on appeal despite the fact that he had already been acquitted. So he spends 15 years in jail until they find out that it was somebody else.
Mm.
And this is not brought up whatsoever. So like this whole part of it
Yeah,
completely left aside. What the
yeah.
film
The
actually
foreigner is not in the movie. The
yeah, not
foreigner is
not at
not in the
all.
movie. Yeah.
What the film seems to be adapting is less so the real story, but rather what came out because of this story. Now remember, this was a huge, huge deal in Japan in the media, because the question on everybody's mind is, why would somebody who had it so together do this to themselves? And it actually led to a book that Shinichi Sano wrote. It was called The Tokyo Electric Power Co. Office Lady Murder Case, because the Japanese like long fucking names.
Yeah, I do.
But what this did, it followed this book. Not only looked at the case, but it looked at the social phenomenon that came out. Because what it found was that there is a large segment of women in the Japanese workplace who identified with the victim's self-destructive urge to sell their body. And it's been called, there's it's actually been given several psychological reasonings, and a lot of it has to do with the patriarchal society, because we're talking about a society where, even as far as I know, even today, when a woman works in a workplace, even if she maintains a position equal to her male colleagues, she is still expected to serve tea and to act as much lower than her ranking would imply. And so there's this almost, it's almost like the Madonna and the whore complex in a sense, except that it's being created not by an outsider on them, but by themselves. And this idea, this desire to sell their body, has been called the Yasuko Syndrome, which is named after the person who has died in this case.
Hmm.
And it seems that what Sono is adapting is this, and that one of the characters that we have is clearly based on the real murdered person, but the other character is a fabrication which represents this desire, and it basically lets us walk through and understand that.
In the movie, that character is represented by the college professor Mitsuko, and the person entering into the world that's kind of, being introduced to it, and we see the new desire coming out in her is the devoted housewife Izumi, who has the novelist husband that's very controlling, and
Very controlling, but in a very odd sense. He's not controlling in the beat her way.
no,
He
no.
has this sort of sense of authority and of detachment, which is, I think, best exemplified by the only time that we see them be sexual together in any sense. Because one of the
Hmm.
big issues that plays is she constantly wants to fuck his brains out,
Hmm.
but she can't because of just how repressed he is. And this makes her, or, well, not how repressed he is, but how repressed he seems to be, which makes her think that he's like this, kind of innocent angel of a person. But there's this one moment where he's coming out of the shower and
Oh,
she's about to
yes,
go, and he's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
"Stop, do you want to see my penis?" and,
yeah,
and she's like, "Yeah." And so he strips naked, and
yeah.
then he
That
goes, "You
scene.
can touch it if you want." And it's I mean, one thing this movie
Yeah,
has
that.
going for it is the most on-sexual sex of all time, and this is
Okay,
just,
yes. This movie is all about sex. This movie is all about control, and there's so much nudity, so much. It's never sexy. It is never sexy, and it never tries to be. It's just, here's some beautiful people. They're doing some kinky shit, or they're, but it's not sexy. And I
no.
kind of appreciate that Sono didn't try to make it so. He doesn't seem to judge the
Yeah.
characters, but he does seem to say that, yeah, this character needs some help, you know?
And I think that I do agree he doesn't seem to judge the characters, and I actually think that he shows a lot of compassion for his characters throughout this movie. Even the ones that are horrible get a level of compassion. We're talking, there's one person who commits a sexual assault,
That
and,
Adam
or I
driving
just let's
that Adam Driver looking motherfucker, I hated him.
oh, he's absolutely this horrible, horrible person and character. But then by the end,
Yeah, he gets put in
even
a scene
even
and you
as
almost
even
feel bad for him.
exactly, now almost is the key word, but it takes a lot to
Almost. No,
be able
he,
to
fuck him,
give that
fuck
level.
him. But
I
yeah,
do, I do agree 100%. Like, he's a piece of shit. He's awful. He got what he deserves. But the movie doesn't say, "Hey, he got what he deserves." The movie shows him getting what he deserves as being as awful as anything else.
I would say that he's the only character at the end of the movie that realized at the last possible second, oh shit, I'm in a horror movie.
Yes, which, let's talk
Let's touch
about
on that.
one. Yeah, there's one really interesting fact about this movie, which is kind of representative of Sono's au revoir. I probably messed that up. That's representative of Sono's filmography as a whole, which is that he very much flirts with a half dozen different genres in any one film. And
Yeah.
there's moments in this movie which are so there's one character we haven't talked about, which is the police detective who is on the case,
Yeah, I
and
really like her, I
she is
think.
haunted. She is legitimately haunted by a Japanese ghost.
Explain that.
um, we have a moment where she's on the subway and she's looking at the different women around her and thinking about what it means to be a woman, essentially. And she looks down
Hmm.
out to the next train car, and there's just this ghostly figure that moves in the way that's representative of the way that the Japanese ghosts kind of
Hmm.
drift rather than actually walk. And we don't really know what that is, but immediately it hits that part of your head where you're like, well, that was a horror movie moment.
Hmm.
And as the movie goes on, we have a very interesting scene. So our female detective is in a relationship which is as destructive as any of the others in this film.
Yeah.
And she's really controlled by this man that she's cheating on her husband with, even though she doesn't want to, but she doesn't know how to escape, which is the film implies that that this actually gives her a insight to this case that her male counterparts could not have. But she's at one point she is in the place where the dead body was found, and he calls her and she's masturbating. Now it actually, the way the editing's done, it destabilizes whether or not that call and that masturbation ever happened. But as
Yeah.
she's sitting there, the water starts to like pour on her face, and then suddenly this ghostly figure is there choking her, and we go into a flashback because it turned out that there had been a woman who had stabbed herself in the street. Something,
Hmm.
for some reason, something that happened with her husband or her lover had
It
triggered
was it
her.
was shame. Yeah.
It does seem to be shame because she's stabs herself, and our detective happens to be there and tries to help, and the woman's like, please, you have to like destroy my phone, he can't find out.
Hmm.
And she is being haunted by this ghost, and this is a woman who killed herself for the same emotional distress that this character is going through. So of course it makes perfect sense why she would be haunted by her. I don't think it was an actual haunting, but rather a psychological
Yeah.
projection
Yeah.
on her part.
Hmm.
But it plays 100%. It feels like Kurosawa, Kiyoshi Kurosawa, is that his name?
Mm-hmm.
It feels like that Kurosawa's film Retribution, in the way that the ghost in that acted.
No, I guess so. I didn't pick up on that when I watched it, but that makes some sense. Yeah. One of the things I like about the movie is that it yes, the women are all sexualized at some point in the movie, but it doesn't take away from the fact that they have complicated characters. I mean, the opening of the movie has the detective having sex with her um her affair in a hotel room, and we don't even know she's a detective. She gets a phone call, she rushes out of the hotel room, and then next time we see her is she's in the alley putting on her badge and everything, going up to the case. And I like that because to me it was interesting how it was just like any other movie would not have you think that's how you introduce a detective
What's
or a
also
female
interesting,
detective.
yeah, well, what's also interesting about it is, just to build on one of the things you mentioned. You just said that she's in there with the person she's having the affair with, but we have no idea.
Hmm.
We're
No,
not given any sense of this for
no,
like the
no,
first
no
40 minutes.
context at first. No,
It takes a
no, and
long time for us to get there, and when we get there and we see like one of the her character arc both revolves around solving this case, but it also revolves around trying to make sense of her own relationship to this person, and her own
hmm
sense of having to kind of I don't want to call it sin, but having to, and I don't want to say sell herself because she doesn't, but sort of
no,
her own sense of having to give into the depravity that she feels and wants to avoid, but she kind of feels trapped in it. And
and
it
she maybe even enjoys it, but at the same time she does want out of it.
That's one of the things, and that you did also mention earlier how you could really play this film. You could play this film the way that a lot of Japanese pink films do, where it's like I watched one recently, and I won't even think of its name. But the idea was a teacher was raped, and then she realized she can't get off unless she is raped, and so she like goes on a hunt to find her
Fucking
rapist in order
hate
to start
that.
a relationship with him, and it's
Hate that.
horrible. It's absolute. It's absolute. I watched it in pure fear and pure disgust, and it was one of those things where it's like, I know I should shut this off, but like I need to know, and I need to stoke this anger and not forget it.
Yeah, no, I
And what
get that.
this one does is it plays with these themes. It does play with sexual assault and cheating and what it means
Yeah.
to find pleasure even, but it does it in a way that in no way feels exploitative of the characters or the actors involved, and it does not feel like it is trying to say one way or another any of the actions are good or bad. It feels like it's trying to say, how do we make sense of this social phenomena?
Yeah, I think that's right. And you have the assistant professor that turns into that in the you have the assistant professor Mitsuko, who at night is a sex worker, and she does it because she wants to, and that's one of the other things is these are a lot of these characters are making choices. Even Izumi, the housewife who finds herself on a porn set, she goes back there. She finds some empowerment, or at the very least, maybe some warmth that she didn't get at home, and she enjoys herself. I mean, there's at
There's
one point later in the
actually
movie where she says that when some guy that hey, they have a good time on set, the porn actor, where he wants to sleep with her, and she's like, okay, how much are you going to pay me? And because
that
she
becomes
basically
a
came to the
very
conclusion
important
that if you
idea.
don't have sex with somebody that you don't love unless you're getting paid, and that's basically becomes her like um her guiding light in life is sex for payment. It kind of becomes her thing, and she can't seem to shut it off, and it becomes a little bit sad at the end, her
I want
character, but
to I want to build on that, but I also want to touch on the porno set. So I'm going to build quickly
mhm,
on that, which is to say that what happens with this idea of sex for money, it actually, one of the things that it exposes is the sort of the men are absolutely fine to sleep with you if it's free, but as soon as it costs money, it becomes
mhm,
you're trash or you're something else, and it really helps to it helps her to identify the inherent misogyny within her relations or her relationships to the men around her in her life.
and that comes up later in the film too when she's on the street as a sex worker, and, a guy comes up and he wants to take her somewhere, and she basically gives her rates, and he's like, "What the fuck?" And he walks off, but to her, it makes sense. She knows who she is now, and she's not ashamed of it.
Now,
Sometimes some of the things she does, maybe, one could argue that, that one scene at the end by the pier was odd.
it was, and I don't want to bring that up. I
Okay, we're not
don't.
gonna
I
bring that
feel.
up.
I feel like that one is like by that point we're too far in the third act and we're getting
Fair,
too
fair, fair.
much.
Okay,
We've
but
already
we need
spoiled
to
the hell
bring
out of
up the
this.
coffee
Actually,
scene.
before we get to the coffee scene, though, I want to go back and I want to touch the coffee. I love the coffee scene, Kelly. We're getting to the coffee scene. Don't worry. But I want to touch on the idea that what you talked about with the porno shoot.
Mm,
So when she gets to the porno shoot and that she doesn't know it's a porno shoot, she didn't expect so many people. There's many chances when she could leave, but she stays. And at the end of that time is when she actually cheats for the first time with this guy.
yeah.
And we talked about the idea of empowerment. Now it's well after she started doing sex work that she goes back to the porno shoot the second time, I believe.
That's true. I think you're right.
what
Yeah.
what happens though is we have a scene immediately following. She is home, she is naked in front of the mirror, and
Mhm.
she's acting out her role within the supermarket, by being completely nude and like posing and doing
Yeah.
like making
Try some
herself look
sausage?
attractive.
Would you like
And
to try some sausage? Sausage.
legitimately is like she left this, and she found power within her own sexuality, which she hadn't, which
Yeah.
she, because of her husband, she had repressed her own sexuality. And so she lets this out, and then it actually helped her to flourish at her job. And it gave her this confidence, and I think that's part of the reason that it's led her further and further and further down.
Yeah, and I don't think that we should take from it that the movie said a woman is taken advantage of, and then it makes her stronger. That's not what the movie is, but it does seem to say that sex changed her somewhat. One of the Guilty of Romance reminds me of a pair of Shinya Tsukamoto films, which are also about female empowerment, at least partly through sex. Or
I have a feeling I know what one of them is, but I haven't seen it.
Okay, well, one of them is A Snake of June.
I knew it.
Hmm. And the other is Tokyo Fist. And A Snake of June is about a woman being stalked, and basically it leads to some sort of sexual empowerment on her part.
You said that
Tokyo
you actually
Fist,
recommended that one to me at one point.
yeah, I do because you're a perv. Um,
Oh shit! And you know I'm not editing that out.
and the other one, Tokyo Fist, I actually remember more clearly, and in that one, it's the woman is the girlfriend of this one boxer who enters into a rivalry with another boxer, and they just fucking hate each other. These two boxers, and they just kind of destroy each other. And meanwhile, while
That sounds
toxic
interesting.
masculinity is just going insane, and there's blood flying everywhere, she goes out and becomes a new person. She's like, "Fuck these boys." I'm doing my thing. And she starts doing body modifications and other things. And it's just an awakening of, I don't need to be this stupid, doting girlfriend. I can do my thing. And then, of course, the guys are like, what the fuck? But, it's because it's about, people changing when you're not looking because you're caught up in rage and all that sort of shit. But in this one, uh, the husband so controlling, and he's a popular novelist, and he's got his own thing.
Oh,
By the way, what the fuck is up with writers who can read their work so confidently to a room full of strangers? I don't get that. Anyway,
I
but
can do that.
you could fuck you. So
I've spent a lot of time on stage though.
yeah, and so he's super controlling, and he doesn't seem to realize how much she's changing, and it's sort of
No, and
similar.
that comes to a head. Like that's the idea of him not recognizing how much she's changing actually plays a huge role in the third act. And like it ties up it really does take everything and tie it up in a nice bow. But Kelly,
Hmm.
before we risk spoiling,
Mm.
you want to have a coffee with me?
Okay, so the coffee scene. I don't know if I want to set up exactly what happens. I don't even know if I want to say all the players
Why
involved.
don't we do it this way?
Mm.
We have our two main characters meet up with an older woman who has them over for coffee, and it does not go as planned.
No, and then she starts screaming, "I'm gonna kill you! I'm gonna kill you!" And everyone's laughing at her, but our main girl is like, "What the fuck?" And
Actually, if I remember correctly, on that so we have the Adam Driver looking motherfucker is with them and laughing. Our main girl's freaking out, but the other girl is being like, "Go ahead, kill me, go
yeah,
ahead!"
yeah, do it, do it. But
Literally
she's
like
also
prodding her
taunting. Yeah,
hard.
yeah,
And
and
the
it's
woman,
so wild
is it's this
because
old woman who
it
is
doesn't.
breaking down.
Yeah, and she's got a knife through her throat, and okay, it just goes from it's like, okay, this is an uncomfortable scene, and then suddenly it's like, fuck, we're just going insane now, and it's
It well,
so
well actually the
Lynchian and weird, and I loved it. I laughed.
oh it's so insane, and one of the reasons it works so insane is like, okay, we're sitting here, we're having this dinner, the old lady gets up, she leaves, and then she comes back in, and it just, as soon as she comes back in, it just, she has the knife, and it immediately goes from being what was already a very uncomfortable dinner. You know what? I'm gonna give them just the old woman is the prostitute's mother who knows what she does and like is
Oh,
just
she
not too
asks her
happy
at
with
one
it.
point, "How's the sex work going?"
No,
Like,
no, she asked that to the Adam Driver looking motherfuckers, which means that she knows that he is also her pimp as well,
yeah,
which is like
it's
it's
bizarre.
so messed up. And
But I just
this
love how
this
it just goes to 11 at no
Oh,
notice, and
I actually, when I was watching it, I sent you a message that was like, this just got fucking Texas Chainsaw up in here. Like, it,
oh,
it,
that's
it
what that
has
was
that
about.
same level. Yeah, it has that same level of just absolute insanity. Everybody's yelling over top of one another, and it's
Hmm.
all focused on one person who's at the table and who is not supposed to be here, but
Hmm.
is. Like it feels almost like a direct reference to that to us, like spiritually, I guess, not direct, but it feels like a spiritual reference
Yeah.
to Texas Chainsaw. And it is fucking wild. That old lady gives a hell of a performance, and the Adam Driver looking motherfucker is always like he's introduced as essentially a sex criminal, and you hate him, but he's in a couple moments of insanity like this where his response is just to laugh and enjoy it, and it's every time it cuts to him, I'm laughing just because of the black comedy of it. That
Yeah,
there, you
yeah,
just
I
have this guy
do
just
appreciate that.
watching such horrible depravity, just like smiling the whole time, like it was me watching a Patton Oswalt stand up or something.
And then at the
Oh,
end, he's not laughing so much anymore when he realizes this isn't joking
yeah,
matter.
yeah. I mean, that's a much different scene that we won't get
Mm,
into, but
yeah.
his eyes get opened, and oh boy, he did not enjoy it.
And you mentioned the old lady giving a great performance in her one of maybe only two scenes. I want to pay some respects to the three leading ladies of the movie, who I think are all just great.
Oh yes, yes, please.
Okay, so Megumi Kagurazaka, I'm hoping I pronounced that right, plays the housewife Izumi. She's a regular of Sono's. He uses her a lot from Why Don't You Play in Hell, Cold Fish, Tokyo Vampire Hotel. And she's
Oh, I'll have
really
to
good
keep an
in
eye out
this.
for her then.
Yeah, she's really good in this. I like her a lot.
I
She,
mean, she
because
carries
she's
this
so
movie.
innocent, but yeah, I mean, she does. She's not the first credited actress in the movie and might not even be the second, I can't recall, but she carries the movie. The detective, Kazuko, played by actress Miki Mizuno, uh, she has a little bit less to work with in her role. At the very least, less showy scenes than the other leads, but I like her a lot.
She has a, she has
Mostly,
she has my favorite moment in the whole movie. Honestly, she has a performance where it's a very simple scene. Nothing's really happening, and it's so understated and quiet, and yet you can read so much into into her face and into her body language that it's
yeah,
it's
no,
great.
I love how she plays the character as a very smart cop, but never plays the character as a tough cop or as a cop trying to fit in with the boys. She's very much a woman that's stuck in a very shitty situation, and I really liked her performance. And then we have the sex worker slash professor Mitsuko, played by Makoto Togashi. Then we have the sex worker professor Mitsuko, played by actress Makoto Togashi. Yeah, I got it right. Um, she's a lesser known working actress, mostly seen in supporting roles like in stuff like Cure, Taboo, and Miss Zombie. But holy shit, she's
Wait, she's
terrifying
she's
in
in Miss
this.
Zombie.
She's in Miss Zombie. Yeah,
She must be the mother.
I cannot tell you. I have not seen that one.
Oh
But she's
fuck! I
terrifying
I,
in
I bought that
this.
recently. Oh,
She's
she's.
so
I mean,
she's
we can't get into too much with her because but whatever when she when
her eyes. Oh my god.
she flip flops though is what she does. That's why
Oh
she's
yeah,
so terrifying. It would be one thing
she's
if she was just a scary woman. It's that she changes on a fucking dime.
yeah, no, she is your best friend and your worst enemy sort of character. I mean, she absolutely tries to warm up to Izumi and and it seems really genuine, and it's sort of sweet and sort of soft, and it's like, oh, this is the friend that our housewife character Izumi always needed, someone that was not shaming her for having the interests that she has. And then she has moments where she's
Oh,
just a fucking bomb in a room, and it's just terrifying.
and I'm gonna word this very. Oh, well, I'm editing this part out. I'm gonna word this very carefully. Not only is she a bomb in a room, but she literally, bomb is the best word, because it doesn't matter who is around her.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter if you're her friend, her lover, her client. It does not matter who is around her. She is a bomb. She goes off. Period.
And it's fascinating to watch, and a little bit scary. And
It is.
so
There's so
so
many twists and turns in this film that it's like, I'm not, as I go through this on that, I'm going to edit out a couple choice lines that we've had,
mhm.
but it's one of those, just to, to make sure that you, the audience, can't get too far ahead of us on it, because you really need to experience this one yourself, I think.
Now this is the third and final film of Sion Sono's unofficial, sort of thematically linked hate trilogy, uh, preceded by Love Exposure and Cold Fish. I'm going to say that this is my least favorite out of the three. Um, I
This is my
don't.
second favorite.
You liked it more than Cold Fish, I'm betting.
I liked it more than Cold Fish, but Love Exposure is Sono's best film.
Masterpiece.
Oh, it's
Um,
that's again. We already said it once. I'm going to say it again. Watch that fucking movie. Love
so,
Exposure is one of the best movies of the 20th century, or 21st century.
no, it's great. And Guilty of Romance, I just think is a little bit. I don't want to call it bloated. It just sometimes meanders more than I would like, and also I think that I'm going to be honest, it's more unpleasant to watch than I'd like from most of my movies. That's just me speaking for
That's
myself.
that's something that we're going to see, actually, probably more as we do the
Yeah,
podcast.
no,
Is
that's the difference
I
between
I
Zack and I.
definitely like unpleasant movies, though I want to be clear that that's not just a, oh, let's go watch slaughtered vomit dolls or grotesque. Like, I need that. Like, it can be mean, it can be dark, it could be unpleasant, but it has to have some fucking value. And I do think this has value. Though
Oh,
you
it does. It
mentioned
does. It
bloated.
does.
You
I want
mentioned
to. Eh,
bloated, and I
bloated's the wrong
wonder
word.
if, well, actually, I was just wondering, do you think that the American cut might be better because it's like an hour and 50 minutes instead of 2 hours and 20?
I
It
did not
might
know that such a thing
actually.
existed. Um,
Yeah, there's an American cut and the original Japanese cut, which is what we watched.
oh, okay. I did not know that. I am not going to say that some producer in America made a better film than Sion Sono did. I'm not going to say that, but I do think that it didn't need to be as long as it was. I mean, hey, sure.
Isn't that sort of a, like, that's kind of a Sono thing too, because like Love
Yeah, he
Exposure is
makes long
four
movies.
hours and he made it to be six originally.
Yeah,
Which I
no,
want that. I wish we had that cut, actually. That's a
yeah,
movie that could have just kept going and I would have been okay with it. Like
yeah,
like
me
I could
too,
still
me
be
too.
watching that movie now and be okay with it.
um, yeah, no, he does make long movies, and I usually don't mind that. To me, this one, maybe it was because so much of the content was objectionable, in my personal opinion, that I was
Well,
like,
I
"Oh,
mean, I would
another
say
one
that
of
it's
these scenes."
objectional to, yeah, I would agree with that.
And
But
so it's
I
like, "Oh,
also,
another scene of sex that's really kind of unpleasant to watch," and it's like, okay, at least there were cool
I found that the
shots.
unpleasantness of the sex was very, and this is, I don't know if I should say this on a public forum, but it reminded me a lot of some of the younger years in my life where, when I was a drug addict, and what we would do is take drugs and lose ourselves in sensual pleasure as a way to try to quiet those demons and those self-destructive urges. So it was very, it reminded me of a lot of experiences I went through. Now, of course, I don't want to imply that I am likening my male experience to the Japanese female experience, but rather that I felt I felt connected on a level, I think, a little deeper um, deeper than I expected to, for sure.
I have no real comment on that one.
But why that gives me a deeper connection to it. You, on the other hand, represent the opposite, where you not saying our life experiences, but rather as a viewer, and that you found that the amount and the unpleasantness of the sex kind of took you out a little bit.
Sure, I think maybe took me out a little bit because I was often thinking about, well, okay, sexual violence is a thing that bugs me a bit, and so that always kind of knocks me out of a movie a bit. And there's only one scene in the movie that qualifies as that, in my opinion.
Yes, and I want to just I really want to state my opinion real quick, which is I actually that scene really bothered and that was the hardest moment of the movie for me too. Like I'm not sitting here like, oh yeah, whoo, sexual violence. No, it wasn't. I don't want to imply that I had a pleasant experience with it, but rather that I enjoy an unpleasant experience. And so, like, that feeling of discomfort is something that I like in my art, but it's not that it was like, oh, yay, boy, howdy, here we go, another rape,
Yeah.
woo.
Yeah. So I just want to give a note to listeners that might be interested in this movie. If you see a motherfucker that looks like Adam Driver, yeah,
Skip
he's
to the
the
next
one.
scene. It's
Don't trust Adam
actually,
Driver looking
if you're
motherfuckers.
watching the uncut Japanese version, the scene happens around minute 42 to 47 or so.
Yeah,
It's in
somewhere in
that
there.
range.
Yeah,
They go
you're
to a hotel. As soon as you see them at the hotel, you could actually skip forward to the next scene. You understand that what happens is she gets assaulted, and if you understand that, then you could skip that scene if you find it very, like, if you have a hard time with things like that.
and I
I don't
appreciate
think
that
that you
you
would
gave me that
hurt.
content warning and that timestamp before I watched it. I mean, I have seen much worse, but at the same time, I don't like that stuff, and it put a dark cloud over the movie for a little while, and so it's just a it's okay. Here here's the thing about Guilty of Romance. I mentioned it's long and it's unpleasant. For me, it was a world that I was happy to leave at the end.
I would agree with that as well. I do think it puts a dark cloud over the film for a bit. I think that's intentional. I think, like,
Oh,
I
sure,
think it.
sure.
I don't think this is a Game of Thrones Sansa's wedding
Mm-mm,
sort of
mm-mm.
thing. I do feel that this is very particular because this story is legitimately about this, but that does not make it for an easy experience. And had I known this going into it, I don't think I would have picked it for the show. However, I think that we've gotten a wonderful conversation out of it.
I do
I
too.
do recommend it, but I do think that it needs to be amended with the content warning as well.
And I recommend it for people that have seen a lot of Sion Sono films. I will not say this should be one of your first 5 Sono films that you should see. I don't think so.
I
I think there
think
are
this is
many
my fifth.
better. Maybe 5th? Okay. Okay,
I
not
think
top
this is my
3
fifth.
anyway,
What's it?
but
Suicide Club. Would You Play in Hell? Um, Love
why don't
Exposure,
you?
Cold Fish, and then this. I'm pretty sure this is number 5 for me.
Not for me, not for me, but, and that's okay, but, it's just, at the very least, don't make it your first one,
No,
'cause
go
it's
make your first one should be Love Exposure or the Hell
Why Don't
One.
You Play in Hell? Yeah.
Why don't you
Uh,
play in hell? Yeah.
yeah, you need a little get a
You know
taste for
what?
that sense of humor.
Either one of those will actually be really funny and really enjoyable, and also have like his jump in between genres and his level of like blood and insanity.
Yeah. All the Sono trademarks.
Oh no, this is number 6. I forgot anti-porno, my favorite one. That's
Yeah,
literally my
I
favorite
like
movie
other
he's ever
ones
done.
like I like other ones like Love and Peace is I just love that film. And even that fucking movie he made about hair extensions is good.
Oh, EXTE hair extension.
I mean, who would have thought that a horror movie about hair extensions would be good? But hey, it is, and maybe we'll get to that one someday.
I mean, we'll
With that being,
definitely there's a lot of Sono that we have to get to
yeah, and
eventually.
with
But
that being said, do we have anything else we really want to say about this one?
well, Kelly, this one was my choice, so why don't you tell the people what we're going to be watching next week?
Next week, we're going to be watching one of my favorite horror comedies from Japan, George Ida's 1989 film Battle Heater. It is wild and so fun, and it's one of those movies that I just enjoy introducing new people to, and I'm really looking forward to introducing Zack to and the listeners to afterwards.
You have built this one up for me, so I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope y'all will join us next week as we discuss it.
Succulent.